Gary Neville also argued that Klopp has been, his word, shielding the owners for years. Do you agree or disagree with that one?
I have mixed feelings about it because Klopp bought into the way Fenway Sports Group run things, and it clearly worked for a while. The problem is there was a system there that involved Michael Edwards, Mike Gordon, and Klopp, which worked really well. The three of them together, and that broke down. And once that broke down, too much power has been centred on Jurgen Klopp.
Well, you talked about Edwards, and it felt like Liverpool were operating so efficiently in the transfer window. Some great players coming through, Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, for instance. What has changed?
Well, obviously Michael Edwards left, and then Mike Gordon went to try and sell the club, and it didn't work. And that left a huge vacuum there, which Klopp has had to fill. And I don't think it's a strength. I remember I spoke to him during the pandemic. I did a long interview with him, and he was talking about being a manager and being a coach. And he said, I don't really want to be a manager in the sort of traditional English style. He said, I just want to be a coach. He said, I come in, he said, I didn't expect to have to buy players. And he talked at length at that. And he's kind of become a traditional English manager in that sense, or at least more than he has been. And I think he'd appreciate having some of the, well, I'm not sure he would appreciate having some of the burden taken off him at the moment, but I think he'd work better if it was removed.
Rafa, you've written about Klopp in The Athletic, and obviously you've seen his career from obviously Dortmund, Mainz as well, and also now at Liverpool. I mean, what kind of manager is he within a club structure, from your opinion?
Well, one of the reasons why he got the job in the first place is because he didn't want to be one of those overbearing managers who make all his demands on, I need a new striker, I need a new midfielder, I need to do this. He was happy to work within a structure. And as Tony said, for years it worked very well. There was probably always a bit more tension behind the scenes that we heard about, but it didn't really matter because it was a productive tension, and the diversity of thought, had its consequences in really good signings. And now we're in a position where I think Klopp has been forced to take more responsibility because of that vacuum. There isn't that Michael Edwards figure that perhaps was ready also to say no to Klopp at times. Famous example is Klopp really wanted Julian Brandt. Michael Edwards really wanted Mo Salah. Julian Brandt is a great player, but Salah has been a sensation, and I think that transfer alone will probably go down in one of the
greatest
greatest deals done in recent years in the Premier League. I think that Klopp, despite what he told Tony a few years ago, of course, likes the fact that there's no one telling him what to do and what not to do. At the same time, I think he could do with a bit more help. And now they have a short-term appointment in Hans-Jörg Schmatke, who I'm sure is pretty good at doing deals. And I think with the Lavia one, if I can just come back to that quickly.
Please. Yeah, for sure.
I don't see a big problem in clubs haggling. I think maybe a few years ago, we wouldn't have heard step by step what the negotiations are, and you just, you hear that Liverpool interest, and 10 days later the deal is done and nobody says anything. Now you have a lot more transparency, you have a lot more leakage, and you get a sort of a play-by-play commentary, and it looks as if it's very complicated and very embarrassing that they can't agree on $1 million here or there, but this is how transfers happen all the time. You just didn't hear about it that much. So I don't have a problem with that, and I think that Lavia will be done. I don't think that Liverpool will be finished. I think they need more midfielders. But yeah, in an ideal world, that they wouldn't be going into the start of the season with still so many gaps to plug.
Yeah, I would love us to talk about the players in just a second, actually, because there's so much to unpack there. Trent Alexander-Arnold moving into a new position and all that, and obviously the midfield deficit. I just want to touch on something you wrote about in 2020, actually. understanding Jurgen Klopp, it's never about him. In that article you wrote at The Athletic, and it was obviously a quote from Martin Kast, the German football reporter, basically saying that it's never really about Klopp. For him, it's more about, you know, the people around him, and celebrating with those people around him, and actually not caving too much into negativity. It's fair to say that Liverpool have definitely had a bit of a fall from grace over the last few years. Do we get a sense that Jurgen Klopp still has that hunger to override this and actually come out of this much stronger?
Yeah, I think he still has that hunger, and I think that he had a very down season the year after they won the title. Tony alluded to this. It was that COVID season. His mum passed away. Liverpool weren't doing well. There was a real sense of sort of a footballing depression that had fallen upon the club.
There was a strong fear he'd leave at that point.
But that has completely changed. And I spoke a lot to him during last season, where, of course, they underachieved and they only finished 5th. But I sensed pretty early on that he was determined not to go out on a low. And I think there's a huge appetite to win one more big trophy before his time is up. It might be that if he wins something big, he might bring that forward and say, you know what, I go a year early. He still, I think, has his eye on the Germany job. So depending on what happens there with Hansi Flick, that might then influence his thinking. And maybe if things had worked out differently on the Germany front, we might have seen Klopp leave earlier, but it wasn't to be. But I do sense that in the words of Pete Kravitz, the hunger to achieve always outweighs the fear of failure and of coming short. And despite, I think, a general sense maybe with one or two sections of Liverpool supporters that this is shaping up to be another difficult season, I don't get that from him. I get real optimism and this sense of let's really go again. And I think a lot of it's down to players being fit, because rightly or wrongly, I think in his mind, the biggest problem about last season was not lack of recruitments or, you know, changing the midfield or maybe shifting players out earlier, but the disruption from injuries, which then had a knock-on effect because Liverpool play this very intensive style, so you need to have rest periods when players can't be rested, then they're more likely to get injured, then they, you know, then you have to play somebody else who should be rested. So it had this constant sort of disruptive effect, and I think he feels with everyone being fully fit that they're going to be a very different proposition this season. Yeah.
Do you get that sense that this Liverpool squad could be a very different proposition with a new mindset from Jurgen Klopp? And also a big one, are you surprised he signed a contract extension, considering you thought at one point that Jurgen Klopp might be leaving Liverpool?
Well, I wasn't surprised because you saw the change in his mood. From, I mean, he was really down in that COVID season, and no wonder. I mean, the Wales was down.
The world was down, yeah.
You know, he had personal loss, and he hated playing in empty stadiums. You know, he really does feed off the fans, and he feeds off the. Again, one of the things he once said to me, he said, if I wasn't involved in football, he said, I'd be going to the match. I'd be a fan. I'd be in the, he said, I wouldn't be standing anymore. I'd have to sit in the seat because, I'm too old. He said, but, I love it. And he does. And I think the other thing that people often don't see about him, because, he comes over really smiley and happy, and he's always sort of bouncy. Obviously, after matches, he's sometimes unhappy. But he really does have a core of steel, right, behind that smile. And he's always up for the fight. So he is, he will be very keen. He is very keen on battling back and sort of doing better than last season.
If you like this video, click subscribe for more content like this. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season to bring you the inside track to the biggest stories in football. If you'd like to listen to the full episodes for free, search the Athletic Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.